The Oracl3 Network.
My fellow citizens, our Earth is in the middle of a crisis, plunging deeper into chaos. And though I feel your pain and your loss, we can't stand idly by and let this happen. We must rise up and... Sorry. Damn it. Well, this is awkward. Hi, my name is Josh Shell, and I am the host of the Let's Start a Cult podcast, where each episode, myself and some guests take a look at different cults from around the world, for educational purposes only, and definitely not to start our own cult. Join me every other week as we break down dangerous religious cults, political extremist groups, and every other kind of cult in between. Should I apologize for the terrible southern accent? No? Okay. Subscribe and listen to Let's Start a Cult anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Hey, Rainbow Warriors. This is my disclaimer. Beyond the Rainbow is a true crime podcast. It's not suitable for young children, and maybe not even for some adults. I tend to swear like a sailor, and I'm kind of proud of that. Listener discretion is advised. Hey there, Rainbow Warriors. Welcome to Beyond the Rainbow, True Crimes of the LGBTQ+. I'm your host, CJ. I hope everyone's doing well. I can't recall the last time we had so many freaking triple-digit days in a summer. Where I live, we've already had over 20 100-degree plus days, and the hottest month of August isn't even here yet. So far, the hottest day we've had here has been 113 degrees, but it was only 99 today. So let me get out my parka, because 99 compared to the rest of the days, it's downright chilly. And of course, we have wildfires raging out of control again. The one closest to me is called the Dixie Fire. It's an awfully cute name for such a destructive bitch. The Dixie Fire is now considered a megafire. I guess a megafire is fueled by drought and long periods of temperature over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Over 143,000 acres have been destroyed so far. The fire is only 18% contained, and people from my county are getting evacuated. But I don't think this fire is as close to me as the other fire from last year, because I haven't been waking up to my car full of ash yet, and I can still see down the street. I was really hoping we'd be better prepared this year for the wildfires, but with the endless drought we seem to have here, there doesn't seem to be an end in sight. Find me on the socials as either Beyond the Rainbow Pod or Rainbow Crimes. Should you like to help support this one-woman show, please check out my website at beyondtherainbowpodcast.com. On the site, I have links to my merch store at TeePublic for shirts, mugs, and other fun items, and a link to my Buy Me a Coffee account. Telling a friend about the show is a great way to support as well. Finally, leaving a 5-star review ups this show's algorithms, and it gets the podcast noticed. It's important that these cases are heard, that victims' stories are told, and that someday, just maybe, the hate will end. Also on my website is a photo gallery of past cases and a list of missing but not forgotten LGBTQ+ people. This episode's missing is, well, I actually have two, and neither have a whole lot of info about them. Both of the missing are teenagers, so I thought I'd put them both out there. The first is a 17-year-old trans boy named Evan Leno. Evan's dead name is Erica, and he's missing from Bartlesville, Oklahoma. Evan is said to have walked away from his home, leaving behind his cell phone and his belongings. He did this on July 12th of this year, just a few weeks ago. Evan had just graduated from high school. He's described as white with dark brown hair, dark brown eyes. He wears glasses and he stands 5'8", weighing about 120 pounds. Should you have any information that could help find Evan, please call Bartlesville Police Department at area code 918-338-4001. My other missing is gender nonconforming 17-year-old Trey Miller, who also goes by Tiana Miller. Trey went missing April 12th of this year from Excelsior Springs, Missouri. They are black, stand 5'6" with black close-cropped hair and dark brown eyes. Should you have any information on Trey/Tiana's disappearance, please contact the Excelsior Springs Police Department at 816-630-2000. And that's about all the information I have on our missing this episode. Not a whole lot. I do have a question for you, though. How many Rainbow Warriors have had some type of experience with autism? Come on, don't be shy. Raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. Wow, that's a good amount of you, I see. Just fucking with you guys. I can't see you. Except for you. Put your pants on. In this episode's case, our victim has a form of autism called Asperger's, which is considered a high-functioning form of autism. I can't give specific details or symptoms when speaking of autism, because each case is as unique as the individual who has it. I can tell you my experiences from working with children who had Asperger's syndrome. A few of them were not socially outgoing. They were much better at playing by themselves next to another child, rather than interacting with another child. 1 or 2 of the autistic children in my program were very social. They liked to talk and they were very affectionate, which is exactly why I can't give you symptoms of autism. Cognitive, social, verbal, and nonverbal communication is different for each individual who has autism. I had several children who would get stuck on routines and rules. They needed repetition and schedules in their daily life. For example, one of my autistic children, he would need to come into my program with his aide right after school. The 2 of them would then sit down and he would eat his snack, which was not how our program schedule went at all with the rest of the kids. If this child's schedule was disrupted in any way, the boy would have some type of crying meltdown. So we did our best to work with the child's schedule. This boy was not social at all, and he didn't have much use of verbal skills. Another boy, and let me just say most of my experience was with boys who had autism. I think I only had 1 girl that had it. But this other boy, he was very social and he loved to talk. He somehow would get fixated on things, though. There was a time for several months that he got fixated on the company FedEx. He talked about seeing the delivery trucks all the time. I just happened to have a parent in my program who would come in right after work to pick his kids up. He worked for FedEx, and he'd always have his FedEx uniform on. The little boy who was obsessed with FedEx would squeal in delight when he saw him. At Christmas time, the FedEx father brought that little boy in a gift. It was a box set of FedEx vehicles. It was very cool, and this little boy was so excited about it. At a different school I was at, I had another little boy. In the beginning, he was sometimes social, and other times he just wanted to be left alone to draw Angry Birds. He always ate the same thing for lunch also, peanut butter and graham crackers. His aide was working with him to venture out and try new foods. It seemed to be working on some days. This same little boy would have a meltdown if he lost a board game. He was extremely rule-bound. The aide was also working on his reactions to losing at a board game. Before I left the program for good, I had spent 3 years with this boy, and he had progressed so much with his aide helping him. He was to the point he didn't seem like he really needed an aide at all anymore. He was eating different foods, handling defeat in board games. and he was socializing so much better. Nearly all of the autistic children I've worked with were very literal with their words. They didn't understand sarcasm or jokes. If I were to mess around with them and say, "Hey, did Mom let you drive to school today?" they would very seriously respond to me, "Oh no, I'm not old enough to drive yet." And then there were 3 other boys I had. 2 of them were brothers somewhere on the autism spectrum that when they were angry, they would completely lose their shit. They would scream, curse, and get violent. One of them had problems with loud sounds, but my program was a recreational program. I had over 100 kids enrolled, so of course there would always be some noise. When it got too loud, that child would be set off and start swearing, crying, and screaming. The only way to calm him down was to coax him outside with me, and then we'd go and chase the crows yelling, "Caw, caw, caw." After a few minutes, he'd be laughing and the problem was diverted until he went home. And oddly enough, just this morning I was talking to some podcasters about autism on Twitter. One had an encounter with an autistic boy who was not being very nice to her son. And the boy who was not being very nice was not being reprimanded by his parents. They were just allowing it to happen. Which reminded me exactly of the 2 brothers with autism that I had in my program. It seemed almost like the parents got to a point that they gave up. They stopped wanting to try with their kids. They didn't get them an aid or anything. And these kids just kept having misbehaviors. So that's been my experience with autism. Today's case, though, is about Stephen Simpson in the UK. Stephen was about to turn 18 years old. He mostly lived with a single mom after she and Stephen's birth father divorced. Stephen was an only child. He had Asperger's syndrome. He didn't seem to suffer from some of the social issues I spoke of. He was very sociable and friendly, but Stephen was kind of awkward, and he came across as odd in spite of wanting everyone to like him. Stephen was very easy to lead and be manipulated, which made him a target for kids who had evil intentions in mind. Stephen was prone to epileptic seizures, and he had a speech impediment, along with some learning disabilities. Stephen was also openly gay. His mother had moved them to Cudworth, near Barnsley in the UK. It was mostly to get Stephen away from name-calling and paint being thrown on him at the hands of bullies in his other neighborhood. After graduating high school, Stephen asked his mom if he could get his own place now. This worried his mom. She was afraid for Stephen because he was friendly and he was trusting and very vulnerable. But she gave in and knew that he was nearly an adult. It was time for him to be a big boy and mainstream into society on his own. Stephen had just begun college and he was taking courses on life skills. Stephen also belonged to a youth group. In his classes and at youth group, he seemed to be making a lot of friends. Stephen's 18th birthday was quickly approaching, and he decided he wanted to throw himself a party in his new apartment. He asked his neighbor and his new friend, 39-year-old Sean Banner, to help him put the party together. Sean agreed to and came up with the food for the party, and he also supplied the beer. Time for the party to start was upon Stephen, but no one was showing up. Refusing to be bummed out by this, Stephen went out and he roused up some of his new friends, and he brought them over to his place with the promise of food and alcohol. People at Stephen's party were eating and drinking and seemed to be having a good time. Around 9 p.m., party crashers heard about Stephen's party and they dropped in. Conflicting reports said the crashers just showed up, and others said Stephen asked them to come. Stephen couldn't remember inviting them. But Stephen had downed a few beers and he was feeling the effects of the alcohol. So his attitude was that of, the more the merrier. One of the party crashers was a 19-year-old kid named Jordan Sherd. After a couple of beers, the party crashers kind of noticed how childlike and gullible Stephen was. Around 11 p.m., realizing how easy it was to fuck with Stephen, they did. At some point, Stephen, who, as I said, was open about his sexuality, must have told the crashers he was gay. Jordan and his friends started to razz Stephen about it. Jordan began to call him a gay cunt, and he told Stephen to take his clothes off. The partygoers began to chant, "Strip! Strip! Strip!" Stephen, laughing, stripped to his boxer shorts. Someone drew a dick and balls on Stephen's face, and Jordan had written, "I love Dick," on Stephen's chest. Stephen had gay slurs hurled at him all evening long, but he accepted them good-naturedly. A little after 11 p.m., police came to Stephen's door because of a noise complaint. When the police left, the party continued. Someone wrote "gay boy" over the bathroom door. Stephen's apartment was getting trashed. Around midnight, Stephen was dressed in his clothing again. He no longer looked happy. Someone earlier had yanked down his boxers and made fun of the size of his penis. Stephen was sad, drunk, and tired. Then he was angry when he found several party crashers in his bedroom going through his things and smashing his stuff with a hammer. Stephen told the party crashers to get out. A friend of Stephen seized the hammer from Jordan, who was holding it. Jordan just laughed. The crashers left Stephen's room to another area of the apartment. More drinks were consumed, and Stephen seemed to get happy again. Jordan coaxed Stephen into dropping his pants one more time by dropping his own pants. And then Jordan and Stephen danced around in their underwear with their pants at their ankles. By 2 a.m., most of the guests had left the party. There were a few stragglers left. Stephen's neighbor Sean came by to check on things, and he asked the partiers to please turn the music down. Several of the crashers were also still at the party. 3 of the crashers were in Stephen's room again, but Stephen was with them. One of the crashers talked Stephen into exposing himself, in which Stephen unzipped his pants and proudly showed off his penis. That's when a guy named Reese Thompson found some tanning oil in Stephen's room, and he sprayed it all over Stephen's junk. Stephen didn't seem to mind this, until Jordan took a lighter out of his pocket and kept flicking it. Egged on by some of the others, Jordan put the lighter near Stephen's genitals and flicked it. Stephen's entire lower half was engulfed in flames. Stephen was screaming and running around his flat. Jordan and his friends were scared, so they ran out of the apartment and they fled the scene. Sean, the neighbor, went to see what Stephen was screaming at, and he was horrified to see Stephen ablaze. Sean quickly got Stephen into the bathroom and into a tub of cold water. He burned himself as he did so. The flames would go out, then relight until finally they were all doused. The police and the paramedics came. They found Stephen in a cold water bath, and they asked him what had happened. Stephen said, "They sprayed fire lighter on my dick and set fire to me. I think it was Reese. After that, I don't know what happened." Jordan, Reese, and their party-crashing friends were nowhere to be seen. When Stephen arrived at the Barnsley Hospital, his body was so badly burned he had to be transferred to a special burn unit. Stephen had been burned on over 60% of his body. The court documents say the burns were full thickness. Here in America, we have first, second, and third-degree burns. In England, full thickness would be a third-degree burn. where all layers of the skin are destroyed and possibly even the fat beneath the skin. Stephen succumbed to his injuries and he died the following day. Initially, Sean, Stephen's neighbor, was arrested, but he was later released. Including Sean, 6 people were arrested for this incident, including a 16-year-old girl, but she also was released. The person with the most serious charges against him was Jordan. About an hour after lighting Stephen on fire and running from his place, Jordan returned to the scene of the crime. He was arrested at 3:15 a.m. He showed the police his hands and said he burned himself trying to remove Stephen's pants. Jordan had third-degree burns on 3 of his fingers. At first, Jordan tried to say Stephen lit himself on fire. Then he admitted he flicked the lighter when the others were encouraging him to do so. Jordan said he thought the oil would flare up and then just die out. He didn't mean to hurt anyone. It was just a prank gone terribly wrong. He said he didn't know Stephen had disabilities and was vulnerable, although he had just spent 5 hours with him, and there's no way he could have missed Stephen's speech impediment and childlike exuberance. Jordan also claimed, had he been sober, he never would have done it. So, after hours of dehumanizing and humiliating Stephen, without Stephen even realizing these kids were not behaving kindly towards him, Jordan lit Stephen on fire, ultimately killing him. To Jordan, it was just a prank gone wrong because others encouraged him to do it, and since he was drunk, it wasn't even his fault. Wow, Jordan. At Jordan's trial, he pleaded guilty. A psych evaluation on Jordan claimed he had deep remorse for his actions, and he suffered PTSD because of them. In their arguments, his defense team cited many cases of youth pranks that had gone terribly wrong. Prosecution failed to bring forth some very crucial evidence, and they only called 1 or 2 witnesses from the party. To me, prosecution failed Stephen miserably. The judges dismissed the case as good-natured horseplay gone awry. Jordan was sentenced to a measly 3.5 years for his actions that cost Stephen his life. Prosecution then tried to backtrack and get an appeal to retry Jordan, but the request was denied, and the judges stood by their highly weak consequence for Jordan's actions. As for the remaining suspects initially arrested, I don't believe any of them faced repercussions for Stephen's death. You probably can imagine LGBTQ alliances and groups who defend people with disabilities. Well, they were outraged at the lenient sentence imposed upon Jordan for taking Stephen's life. Protests unfortunately did nothing to combat the situation. Jordan's been a free man now for 6 years after he was released in 2015. Rest in power, Stephen. This episode's quickie case comes to us from Sioux Falls, South Dakota. It might come as no surprise to all of you warriors. Trans women of color are at the highest risk for homicide in the United States. The very first day of 2017 would be the very last day for 28-year-old Two-Spirit Jamie Lee Wounded Arrow. Jamie, who used the pronouns she and her, was a fighter. She didn't always have the easiest of lives, which is not uncommon for an Indigenous person. She had some addiction issues, but Jamie wasn't really one to moan and complain about it. Instead, she got help for herself. After having to live in a Sioux Falls sober living home for a while, she was finally standing on her own 2 feet. She had her own apartment. She had herself a job at 5-star call center as a customer service specialist. She had even adopted 2 kittens to nurture and love. Jamie was planning on going to college to become a social worker. She wanted to help others battle the addictions she had overcome. Jamie was excited about starting her new life. It was her fresh chance to start over and do it right this time. Jamie was from the Oglala Lakota tribe, and she had moved to Sioux Falls from the Pine Ridge Reservation, which is also in South Dakota. She had only lived in Sioux Falls about a year. Jamie had a good amount of friends, though. One had said of Jamie made me feel like I could be myself. Another said, Jamie was one of those people who, when she talked, others stopped to listen. She was incredibly honest and showed so much compassion for others. January 6, 2017, 5 days after Jamie's last day on Earth, apartment neighbors of Jamie's called the police because there was a foul smell emanating from Jamie's apartment. Police entered Jamie's apartment, finding her dead of 7 stab wounds on her bed. And of course, the police said, this was not a hate crime. 7 stab wounds and not a hate crime. Things that make you go, right? Police started their investigation, and they found that Jamie's apartment building had surveillance video available. At 8:30 p.m. on New Year's Eve, Jamie is seen on the video entering her apartment with a bag from Kentucky Fried Chicken. About 3:30 a.m. in the morning, the killer is seen entering Jamie's apartment wearing a black hoodie, white shorts, and white sneakers. The killer stops at Jamie's apartment door but is not let in. So the killer proceeds to walk around the building to the outside of Jamie's window and taps on the glass to be let in. The killer is then seen leaving the building at 4:40 a.m., wearing the same black hoodie, black pants this time, and a different pair of shoes. The killer seems to be carrying what is presumed to be white sneakers. Then the killer is seen on camera ditching some things in the woods near Jamie's apartment. Investigators found the white sneakers in Jamie's wallet covered with snow in the woods where the killer had left them. They also found a black hoodie with Jamie's blood tossed into a nearby construction site. Police were able to determine the person on the surveillance video was 25-year-old Joshua Raven LeClaire. Joshua was someone that Jamie had met at the Sioux Falls sober living facility she had been in. 2 days after the discovery of Jamie's blood-soaked, decaying body, Joshua was found and arrested at a local laundromat. Joshua first told the police he was drunk the night of Jamie's murder and that he blacked out. Convenient, isn't it? He said he awoke in a park later that morning with a cut on his hand. Detectives asked how he got the cut, and he told them Jamie had came at him with sexual advances, and he was just defending himself against the advances. And bam! There you have it, warriors! Your trans panic defense. But no, it's not a hate crime. Truthfully, even if it had been labeled a hate crime, the state of South Dakota wouldn't have recognized it in 2017 anyway. It wasn't until 2019 that the Oglala Sioux Tribal Council passed hate crime legislation protecting LGBT and their Two-Spirit people. I have to believe Jamie's murder had a lot to do with this. Joshua's cut on his hand was not indicative of a defensive wound, so that lie was squashed right away. The cut appeared to be from what someone who is stabbing another person gets when the knife slips. Because Joshua had a big list of petty crimes under his belt, his bail bond was set to $1 million in cash. The amount was that high because he was also known as a huge flight risk. Joshua had hidden out before to avoid law enforcement, sentences, and prison time. Ultimately, Joshua was charged with first- and second-degree murder, 2 counts of first-degree manslaughter, robbery, and possession of less than 2 ounces of weed. Joshua pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter. He was sentenced to a 65-year prison term for murdering Jamie Lee Wounded Arrow. Joshua will most likely be eligible for parole after 42 years of his sentence has been served. This puts Joshua at the ripe old age of 70. I think unicorn justice has been served fairly well for this rainbow crime. Good job to Judge Bell, who oversaw the trial in this very conservative, anti-LGBTQ state. As of 2020, the whole state of South Dakota had only 25,000 LGBTQ people, and these are people the age of 13 or older. This is out of almost 900,000 people. And gay conversion therapy has not been banned here. A couple of years ago in South Dakota, there were 3 anti-trans bills trying to gain traction, but I believe they were all shot down. I'm hoping our LGBTQ plus brothers and sisters in South Dakota will someday be able to get their state out of the dark ages. Hang in there, everyone. Love you, Rainbow Warriors. And remember, it's not a crime to be gay, unless you're a murderer.